Hey guys, it's Cyan here again with my second ever video interview. Today we're talking to Joe LoGuidice from N3rd St Gamers, formerly of Esports Heaven. This is a guy who came up from the very bottom, having no connections, no fan base, nothing, and worked his way to a point where now he's working full-time in esports. Lots of cool stories about working as a journalist, lots of cool stories about working as an events coordinator, and I think this interview gives a really cool look at what N3rd St Gamers is planning to do for the future and the prospects that might happen for that brand. There's also a lot of talk about the other esports, not just StarCraft, because again, N3rd St Gamers does a lot more than just StarCraft. They do Counter-Strike and Overwatch and fighting games and Smash and lots of different projects. So there's lots here to sink your teeth into. Hopefully you enjoy the interview. Next week, I'm going to be having a Fear Dragon interview. If you have questions that you would like me to ask Fear Dragon, please leave it in the comments below. Please sub. Please follow me on Twitter. Almost at 200 followers on each of those platforms. It'd be really cool to get there. Without any further ado, here it is, the interview with Joe. All right, hey man, so thanks so much for sitting down and taking the time to just talk to me. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on here. Super excited. Never been interviewed in video form before.
Oh, really?
So this is going to be a first for me, yeah.
This is only my second one, so we're learning together. So the question on everybody's mind, how do you pronounce your last name?
Cool. So this will actually be a great platform for me to clear up a lot of misconceptions. I've heard a lot of different things. It's LoGuidice. LoGuidice, however you want to say it is fine. I've heard everything from like LoGuiduck, LoGducky, yeah, a lot of weird stuff.
So what's the the national origin for that then?
So it's an Italian name, but like the Italians pronounced it LoGuidice, and I guess at Ellis Island, the workers were like, "Oh no, you can't have like an I before a U. Here, we'll fix that for you." So we had our name fixed during immigration.
I've been trying to pronounce your name, and as somebody with a difficult name myself, I wanted to ask you to clear that up right from the get-go. Moving into the esports stuff, so some dry questions at first, maybe before we really sink our teeth into the meat of it. But how did you find yourself getting involved with StarCraft 2? How did you come into the StarCraft scene?
Cool. So I was in like a pretty dark place in my life actually when I got into StarCraft. I was taking some time off college. I wasn't sure if I was going to be going back because I hadn't been doing well in school. I was working part-time at a Staples, actually. It was like a pretty brutally devastating job. Didn't have a whole lot of friends living around town because they were all off at college or in the military or, you know, whatever people do when they're not living with their parents anymore. And this was 2013 when Heart of the Swarm came out. I wasn't like into esports at all. Like I knew they existed, but I had like never found any interest in them. And I went and I picked up Heart of the Swarm the day it came out, just as like for the campaign or whatever. And I started watching like tempo music videos because I thought they were nostalgic, and I was playing StarCraft. And like as I was watching the music videos, there's all these like scenes of the GSL, the OSL, and all these like really cool tournaments. And I was like, well, I want to watch this. So I went and hopped on gomtv.net, and I bought a GSL subscription, and I watched the Heart of the Swarm GSL, and that was the first StarCraft tournament I ever watched, and I was just super in love with it, and I was consuming every bit of StarCraft content I could find, and eventually, like, someone put an ad on Reddit, like, Team Dignitas was looking for writers, and I wrote for Dignitas for a little bit, and it didn't go super well. My content wasn't well received. It wasn't particularly good content. I didn't feel like it was a great place to grow, and I kind of just started making my own content and putting it in as self-posts and whatever, and looking around for a platform. And actually, and I'm eternally grateful to this day, Richard Lewis approached me in a Reddit comment section. I still have it like bookmarked, where he reached out to me, and he was like, "Hey, I see you're trying to be a journalist. Looks like you're a pretty good writer. Like, do you want to chat? Would you want to do some work for me?" And I was like, hell yeah. So he pulled me into their chat room. We had a conference call to get started. And like, that was the first like real esports job I had. And I had a little bit more direction, and all my pieces were starting to get traction. And that's kind of where I started making a name for myself. And from there, I started putting together streams for like a lot of Chinese events that like didn't have English streams, and I was like, oh, you have these great players playing. Why aren't they being streamed? So I found some casters, and we figured out how to get onto the Chinese server, and I just kept saying yes to every project I could, basically, and it eventually landed me where I am.
You talk about Richard Lewis just finding you on Reddit because you were making self-posts with content. I mean, that's a little bit of a Cinderella story, you know? Like, that's kind of exceptional. What did it feel like at the time as somebody who wasn't really known in the community to have somebody who was known in the community at that degree to come and say, hey, do you want to work with me?
So it was a huge deal. I'd liked Unfiltered a lot at the time, so I knew who Richard Lewis was. I knew him primarily as the host of Unfiltered, not as a journalist so much. But I really liked his content, so it was a big deal to like have someone that someone whose content I enjoyed reaching out to me, because I mean that's one thing that I think a lot of people find. If you reach out to people and like ask them for help, a lot of people will be super helpful, and that's really cool. But it's a really special and rare occurrence, I think, for someone kind of bigger than you, so to speak, to be reaching out to you, like to have that feeling reversed. And it was just a special moment for me. And it's like a flashbulb memory. It's something that I'm never going to forget. Like he really gave me a leg up, and I don't think I would be here today if that hadn't happened.
Do you guys still keep in touch? Do you ever hear from him or chat with him in this day and age? Catch up?
Yeah, every now and then. We will talk. He's crazy busy. He's the host or the talent director of E-League now. So like he is booked sideways. But yeah, every now and then we do chat. Definitely, I mean, not as much as when we were working closely together back at Esports 7 though.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience as an esports journalist, because that's really where you kickstarted your career. Working for Esports Heaven, did you ever feel pressured to, have a big scoop, to find a big lead? Because it seems like most of the time now that's really gone by the wayside, and news is released by the organizations as they release it. It's less a big scoop mentality in this day and age. Were you ever pressured, or did you ever feel pressure to get a big lead on a story or anything of that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pressure. Breaking news always gets better clicks than any other kind of content you can do. Like if you're able to break something, that's a huge deal. And I had a lot of scoops, but you always want more, basically. And like there were other people at the time that had more scoops than me. Like with journalists, you kind of have a couple different people. Like some people are really good at like writing features and stuff. Some people are really good at digging up a story. And I felt like the ability to kind of like find a story and hang out in the circles where just you get all that information wasn't supernatural to me. So it felt like there could definitely be some pressure to kind of get better in that and improve my ability to pick up scoops and to break news before, like you said, the teams were able to release it before their official press channels, etc.
So talk for a second about, you mentioned hanging out in the circles where you would pick up on news, that kind of thing. In talking about esports journalism and getting the big scoop, I mean, how do you come upon a network of people who will let you into the know before you're supposed to know anything? Like, how does that come to be in esports?
Cool. So there's a bunch of different ways things can happen. For one thing, rumors. Like, you just hear rumors, right? Like, if you hang out with pro players and you're chatting with them, you'll hear a rumor like, oh, yeah, player X is going to this team. And usually once, like, you have the idea for kind of a rumor, like you probably know the people to ask to try to confirm it. As a rule of thumb, you want 3 people that you trust implicitly saying something. So, like, for one, I guess you want to be kind of just in circles where people are just talking. And even if you're almost overhearing something, you can go from there. Or another thing is, like if you get a whiff of something, dig deeper, basically. Like, one of the bigger stories I broke we found out basically there was going to be a partnership between a pro league team and a Chinese team. And I have a lot of contacts in the Chinese StarCraft scene, and we were able to find out that Invictus Gaming was going to partner with Prime, and they were going to have like the first non-foreign team since EGTL to be competing in Pro League. And we were actually we didn't end up breaking that story, and it was because people involved basically told us, hey, if you break this story, there's a chance that the deal might not go through. And we talked about it internally a lot, and we decided not to break the story, and that was really hard. But that's just like an example of something that you can dig up, you know. But it comes down to once you get a whiff of something, you have to keep following up. You have to ask your friends, and then the last way, having a secret's no fun if you can't tell someone. So if you're friends with a lot of people that like might be in the know, they're gonna tell you things. They're gonna want to tell you things, and they're like, "Oh, I just found out this really cool thing," and you just have to from there know how to like be respectful of taking that info that they told you, and figuring out a way to get it to a story without like implicating them or getting them in trouble or like disrespecting their wishes, you know.
You say that the big thing in finding a scoop is hanging around the pro players and being in those circles and everything like that. But I feel like that's kind of skipping a step. You know, how did you find yourself actually in those circles in the first place?
Okay, cool. So that's like a positive feedback loop kind of thing, right? Like, the more work you do, the more people are like, oh, you're this guy. Like, let's hang out in Skype groups. Let's hang out in Discord servers, whatever that it may be. You just want to put in work and like build relationships with people. And I would say the biggest way to do that is just say yes to literally every project. Like I've said yes to so many things that maybe I didn't know how to do getting started, that I didn't have a game plan for, but I was like, I think this is an opportunity, and I'm just going to jump on it, and I'll learn on the job. And like that's like, for me, admin and qualifiers for Chinese StarCraft leagues. Like that's how I met some people. Running Cheesadelphia obviously puts me in contact with a lot of people. Running online events puts me in contact with people, because generally once you're in contact with someone, they're more likely to be like, hey, come to our hangout space, whether that be a Skype group or a Discord group or whatever.
Moving on from the esports journalism and stuff, I recognize that that's like a really big part of your career, so I want to include it. But now you're working with N3rd St Gamers. How did that transition happen? How did you find yourself from esports heaven to now N3rd St Gamers?
Oh, so this is kind of a funny story. Last year, I used to go to like these LAN, actually, let me back up a little bit. I used to go to these LAN parties that took place at the same venue Cheesadelphia is at. This is like 2013, 2014 maybe. And they were these like bring your own computer LAN parties. They were a lot of fun. It wasn't anything competitive gaming wise. It was just like you would go, you'd bring your own computer, you play video games all night, have some beers, whatever. But about a year ago, like probably last July, someone that I used to go to these LAN parties with, and then I'd gone to like some local barcrafts and stuff with, Jeremy Hurst, he's actually our observer for Cheesadelphia. He reached out to me and he was like, hey, would you want to do the heavy lifting for a tournament? It's going to be in Philadelphia. We've got like $1,000 to $2,000 in prize money, and it's at that venue that we used to go to LAN parties at. And I was like, hell yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, I'd run online events before. I'd never run an offline event, but I was pretty confident I could do it. And the first event went pretty well. And they said, okay, cool. That was awesome. And I kind of thought that would be it. And then they reached out to me again maybe 6 months later, and they were like, hey, want to do Cheesadelphia 2? And I was like, yeah. So after we did Cheesadelphia 2, and like it was a much bigger event, our stream viewership was a lot higher, player attendance was higher, the caliber of players was a lot higher. Like Huck Kellezer was the finals, whereas in the first tournament, Bales, No Regret was. So not that Bales and No Regret were bad players, but Huck Kelleser, it's a big leap. And that event went really well. That second Cheeseadelphia. And I'm working in IT this whole time. Working in IT, basically just fixing computers at a hospital. It was not a super great job. But I decided to take this IT job, and I was going to do as much esports as possible. And IT was going to pay the bills. And if it didn't work out after a year, I would go use something that like my college degree was actually relevant to. But IT was just the hours were flexible, so that's why I chose it. So after the second event, Jarvis, which is the parent company of N3rd St Gamers, and N3rd St Gamers both started offering me a lot of freelance work. And I was doing like a lot of freelance work for them, like probably 20 hours a week on top of my 40-hour-a-week day job. And the CEO of Jarvis basically said, hey, I think we want to bring you on full-time to like run the day-to-day operations of N3rd St Gamers, if that's what you want to do. Like, would you want to quit your job and come do that full-time? And I was like, yeah, that's very much what I want to do. So yeah, after 2 tournaments and a lot of freelance work, they brought me on full-time.
You talked a little bit about Jarvis is the parent company, right? When I was reading on the website, and N3rd St actually seems to have some really affluent backers. 2 of the founders come from a background of founding a, quote, $1 million software engineering firm, end quote. And then the third has a background with Apple and a Zubu TV. So is this a passion project for your bosses, or is it the kind of thing where some really business-minded people wanted to get in on the ground floor of esports before it blows up into the mainstream? What's the situation with that in N3rd St Gamers?
So I would say it's both, honestly. So Chris and John are the CEO and CTO of Jarvis. And then Steve currently works as the director of esports at Azubu. Fragadelphia was the first kind of N3rd St Gamers event, and it was like a really small bring your own computer LAN. And I think it was mostly passion at that point. And it kind of slowly evolved to this point where events were becoming profitable and sponsors started courting them. And it's become basically just a project that is approaching financial viability. And Chris, Steve, and John aren't like super involved in the day-to-day operations of it because they all have, crazy busy work lives. So the amount of time that they've been able to spend is kind of limited, and because of that, there hasn't been. I'm trying to think of how to say it. Like, we haven't been able to push the envelope quite as much. But now that I'm here full time, and they can kind of take a hands-off approach and say, hey, XYZ needs to get done, we're growing at unprecedented rates, and it frees them up from the small picture to focus on big picture things. And it looks like this company that started as kind of a passion project and a hobby is like on track to become the premier East Coast esports organizer. Yeah, I know that was a bit of a roundabout way of answering it, but yeah, it started as a passion project, and now it's becoming like we think it could be our next big thing.
What are their expectations for N3rd St Gamers? I mean, you say you're becoming the premier organizer for your area, but is this the kind of thing where the people that own the company want this to be like a North American dream hack? Do you want to step up into the role that an MLG plays, tour around the country, host different events all over North America? Is that the goal, or what's the end goal right now for N3rd St Gamers? What's the sights set on?
Okay, so I'm not sure what I am and am not allowed to talk about, so I'm going to be a bit vague here. But we have plans, like right now, all of our events are held in our venue that we lease. And it's a LAN center. We have plans to make our main venue bigger. We're looking at a couple different spaces right now. I can't talk details on it, but localhost is not going to be the Nerd Street Gamers venue forever. We're already looking at bigger, better places. In terms of like big events not at our venue, that's something we're super interested in doing. We've talked to people about it, and it's probably going to happen, and I kind of have to leave it at that. Our other big project that is gaining more and more steam is we have a white boxing production company. For people that don't know what that is, it basically means if you want to run a tournament, but you don't have like the in-house staff, you just want to put your name on a tournament, right? You can come to us and say, hey, how much would it cost to run a $5,000 StarCraft Invitational tournament? And we do everything, and Nerd Street Gamers doesn't appear anywhere on that like broadcast. It's just all labeled whoever pays us, and we've been doing that, and that's been really profitable for us. So we definitely want to expand our white boxing efforts. ESL does a huge amount of white box production for people. I think it's one of the biggest things you can be doing in esports. So I guess our end goals would be expand our white box production, have a bigger like DreamHack Festival-y type event, and bigger venue with more of like a esports arena type vibe.
That's really interesting. Now I'm going to press you because I happen to know that Mr. Bitter was on Twitter talking a little bit about StarCraft and Red Bull potentially hosting more StarCraft 2 events. And I know that he named Philadelphia as a city where he'd like to put something, and I know that your name was brought up then by the fans, by a lot of people saying, oh, hey, you should hit up Joe from Nerd Street Gamers because they're already there, man.
Yeah,
so I'm going to press you on that. Did anything come from that? Have you talked to Mr. Bitter at all? Have you talked to the Red Bull boys?
Yeah, so we talked. He's going to come check out our space, and I can't really say anything else right now. But
breaking news. You heard it here first.
No, nothing is final, but we definitely thank you to the community for putting us in touch. Hopefully something will come of it. I don't obviously want to talk details right now.
All right, confirmed. Breaking news.
I didn't say it.
So something that I think is, I won't say fascinating, but something that's really interesting to me is the idea that Cheesadelphia is an event that you guys label as financially sustainable. I mean, that's great in this current environment of StarCraft where everybody's really downtrodden, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, there are so many aspects to financing these events. Can you talk a little bit about that? How important are sponsorships? How important are entry fees to you? Like, where's the money coming from to make that financially sustainable?
Okay, so I could run, if nothing else were to change, I could run a $2,500 to $3,000 tournament without any sponsorships till the end of time. $4,000 is only possible because of sponsorships. Most of our money comes from signups, and that allows us to be kind of flexible in what we're able to do. Because we charge players $50 a piece to sign up. So if we have I think we had 55 signups for this Cheesadelphia. So that's $2,750, and then we took in another $600 in spectator money. So boom, that's the prize pool. And right now, if we run Cheesadelphia, right, we own all of our production equipment, so that doesn't cost us anything. I'm being paid to be at work whether I'm there or not. So is the admin. And we rent the space, so it's not like we have a venue fee. We have a lot of things that allow us to be really, really lean. Our only expense, we make our money back basically once we get our prize pool. And then paying for the casters to come down. And buying them lunch and dinner and all that fun stuff.
You talk about, the fact that you're there every day no matter what. Can you talk about the day-to-day at Nerd Street Gamers and really what that involves? What do you do on a Friday where there's no events or anything like that? What's a regular day for you at work?
Well, so, yeah, a regular day is probably wake up, have any meetings that I might have, and then I go into the venue, and I'm in charge of the facilities there. So, like janitor stuff, basically. Like making sure everything is clean. We actually like rent office space during the day. So I go in and I make sure the people that rent office space have everything they need, like toilet paper and paper towels and all that fun stuff. And then we have events pretty much every weekend. So by about Thursday and Friday, I start getting into serious event prep mode, getting all the PCs laid out how they need to be, getting everything hooked up. If anything needs to be installed, I get it all set up. And then it's all about the weekends after that. Like I come in on a weekend and we have an open LAN party, a fighting game event, and a retro game event pretty much every weekend. So I got to open it up, be there to like greet everyone, have them come in. Some of the stuff we do is casual. It's not competitive. Like people come in on a Friday night to get drunk and play old video games. Like that's one of our more popular events. And people love it. We have like emulators with the little Super Nintendo controllers. And you play like pretty much any old video game you want.
That transitions pretty well into the idea, like, it's not just StarCraft that you guys do. You and I are both StarCraft boys. I'm going to market this mostly to a StarCraft audience, but there's so much more to Nerd Street Gamers. You've done CSGO events. You talk about Fragadelphia. Fragadelphia,
yeah. That's
Fragadel, not Dal. Del. Fragadelphia.
Fragadelphia.
You talk about Fragadelphia, and you're planning on putting off Overwatch. How did you guys settle on the lineup of games that Nerd Street wanted to focus on? Why not Dota? Why not League? League's the biggest game in the world. What made you decide we won't touch those right now? We're going to go StarCraft, Overwatch, Counter-Strike.
So Counter-Strike, our CEO, Steve, was a Counter-Strike 1.6 pro player. So his background is Counter-Strike. He has the connections. He has the friends. He knows how to market to Counter-Strike. And that was why they chose Counter-Strike as their first game. And I mean, basically, that's the game that Steve loves. So, like, that was a pretty natural choice for them. StarCraft, I know when they brought me on, they were basically looking for a partner that could, like, be the Steve of another game. Like, that had the connections, that had the networking, that knew how to market and promote the event to that community. And they found me for StarCraft. So that is kind of how StarCraft got settled in. League of Legends, you can't, like, the kind of tournaments we do don't really work for League of Legends. Like, if teams, like, were to come out and play in, like, a local $4,000 LAN, that can actually affect their LCS eligibility for, like, weird reasons. So it's really hard to have a tournament outside of the Riot system for League of Legends, from what I understand. I'm sure 1,000 people will tweet at me that I'm like super wrong here, but basically like it would be like if playing in non-WCS tournaments like affected your WCS eligibility. Then Dota, like Dota's something we're definitely looking to expand into. It's a super popular game, can't be ignored. And then Overwatch, we all just love the game. Trying to get it on the ground floor, obviously. I've never seen a game blow up this fast before, and I think that's just an effect that kind of Blizzard has when they release a game. At very least, whether or not it becomes the world's biggest esport, it's going to be a super fun game. And yeah, so that's where the choice to do Overwatch stuff came from.
Last week I had Zombie Grub on, and Base Trades looking to move into Overwatch a little bit too, and we talked a little bit about the difficulty in actually recruiting players for an Overwatch tournament. A new scene doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure, the community centers that a game like StarCraft has. So have you found any issues in getting the word out to people that you guys will be doing Overwatch, that Overwatch events are coming? Has there been any issues in that regard?
Yeah, so actually our first Overwatch tournament was supposed to be in July. And we guaranteed a $1,500 prize pool. And we said it would max out at $8,000 depending on signups. Only one team signed up. So we had to postpone the event. And we're looking for more sponsors just so we can have a kind of a higher floor, But the problem with Overwatch is you don't have, and I imagine this could be mitigated somewhat if it was an online event that didn't cost money to enter. But the problem for us with Overwatch is you don't have kind of the local I'm just gonna say GMs because like it's a StarCraft audience, they know what that means. The local GMs that like want to come out and play, they don't exist yet. I mean, like GM just opened for the first time, or the equivalent to GM, top 500, just opened for the first time in Overwatch, what, a week ago? So yeah, I mean, there are now places you can promote your Overwatch stuff. Like our competitive Overwatch is a really good one. There's some Overwatch Discords. Our social media is pretty good. We have a pretty good reach, but it's definitely still hard. And the other hard part is, so when we made the decision to postpone it, we had like 5 people say, hey, I had a full team. I was waiting for the last minute to register. This is kind of like a combination of a plea and advice. If you're going to a local LAN, register. Just register. Like, they rely so much on getting that money and knowing that it's coming. And like a lot of people waiting till the last minute to register can like literally cause an event to be canceled or postponed, which is what happened to us. So please, guys, support your local esports scenes. Like if you're ready to go, if you're ready to go to a local LAN, you want to compete in it, get signed up early. Like do them a favor. It makes their lives easier.
That's actually kind of echoing what I heard from Zombie Grub. She was saying that their tournaments have gotten a lot of, like last-minute signups. It seems to be a really big thing in the Overwatch community, which is a little strange, I guess, but it's a new scene, so...
Yeah, I mean, StarCraft is the same way. Like, Philadelphia, I would say probably about half our signups happened the last week. And the only reason that we got signups in advance is because now I'm friends with a lot of the people that come, and I basically poked them and said, hey, go sign up, go sign up, go sign up, seriously, go sign up. And just annoyed them until they went and actually signed up.
So you said earlier, you touched on this a little bit. You guys run a ton of different events that aren't, the big broadcast stuff. You do the retro gaming, you do fighters, and you do coding events. It seems so diverse. I mean, I'm going to ask you about everything, but first off, I'm really curious about the coding events. Like, what does that entail? What do you guys do with that?
Cool. So we host a group called Code for Philly. And I don't know if there's anyone tech savvy out there. There's a group called Code for America, which is basically like people come together, and let me pull up the official description so I don't make myself sound stupid. But Code for Philly is a similar project to Code for America, but it's more focused on the local Philadelphia scene. And basically people come in, and some people come in with projects that are like, hey, a school needs this, or the city needs this, or wouldn't it be great if like we had a program that could track events going on in municipal parks. And people come in and they volunteer their time, and the city buys them, I believe it's the city, buys them like beer and pizza, and people come in and they just code for free and work on projects that like just help develop the city and help make Philadelphia a better place.
That's really cool. That's really different and really cool. It's so new age too. It's very 21st century chic. I'm a big fan of the fighting games, actually. Street Fighter is awesome. I love watching those events. I'm under the impression that traditionally the FGC sees the biggest events in the areas where there's some kind of fighting game culture pre-established. For the fighters, it's so important to have the arcades, historic FGC stomping grounds. Is Philadelphia one of those cities? What kind of turnouts have you been getting for the FGC nights?
So Philadelphia, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit out of my ass here, so please forgive me when I get things wrong. From what I understand, I'm not a fighting game guy. I've gotten more into it as I help run these events, but like this is not my background. I'm going off what people have told me that come to the events. Philadelphia is kind of in a like tri-state area with New Jersey and New York right now. It seems like Philadelphia is in second place between New York and New Jersey. New York is, from what I've been told, kind of the strongest in this northeast/mid-Atlantic area. But the Philly guys represent, they come out and they'll make deep bracket runs, even if they're not necessarily making it to the payouts. Our turnout's really good. We usually get between 50 to 70 people.
That's awesome. It sounds awesome. I'll openly admit too. I mean, I don't know that much about the FGC or Street Fighter or anything like that. I like it when Chun-Li does the kick move, and I don't know. It's fun to watch though. It's such an entertaining form of video games. So I mean, I have more questions on the FGC. I don't know if you'll be able to answer, and if you can't,
Yeah, I'll
that's
try
totally
my best.
fine.
Fire away.
So how much? I read the list of games that you host at these events, and I noticed Guilty Gear, Pokken, Marvel vs. Capcom 3. For anyone who might not know, Marvel is the StarCraft 2 of fighting games. Everybody always declares that it's dead and dying and will never return. How's Marvel faring in Philadelphia?
So Marvel is generally our second biggest event by bracket size. Seems pretty healthy to me. Like, it's definitely smaller than Street Fighter, but there's always a turnout. It's starting to run into some of the same problems as Melee, where like if you don't kind of own the correct version of Marvel, it's pretty much impossible to legally get it now. So that's definitely something that impedes like its growth, because if you don't have I think it's the ultimate version, like you can't buy it anymore. So you need an Xbox 360 that has this one with all the DLC, and some of the DLC is no longer obtainable from what I understand. So it's that problem where you have an existing pool of stuff, and that pool is only going to get smaller. It's not getting bigger. So that's hard for tournament organizers. And there are ways around it. I'm sure some of the bigger events probably have hacked systems. We rely on people bringing their own system, and then we give them free venue entry. But it's definitely tough to, like, if I wanted to just get everything in-house I needed to run Marvel, I probably wouldn't be able to do that at a reasonable price.
You touched on Smash a little bit just now. As someone who would call themselves an avid esports fan of not just StarCraft, but the whole like esports community, it seems to me that Smash has really pulled itself higher into relevancy in the past 2 years in the bigger picture of esports. What are the numbers like for Smash events?
So our Smash events are smaller but growing. We get about 20 to 30 people usually. For Smash City is the name of our event. One of our big problems is we don't have Melee yet. We're almost there. We have, I think, 3 Wiis in-house now. And I just ordered the lagless converters. We are not going to be doing CRTs, which I know a lot of Melee people will say, boo! But we have 1 millisecond or less than 1 millisecond monitors. And we had like pros and competitive players test it. And they said, okay, like I would prefer to play on a CRT, but this is totally fine. And it basically comes down to the fact that I don't have room to put a CRT anywhere. Like every inch of space is so valuable to me. And CRTs are huge. So we basically have all the gear we need to start running Melee. I just have to get my hands on some copies of the game. And that's going to be our big growth, is once we add Melee in. Because Smash 4 is big in Philly, but the Melee scene is a lot bigger.
So that was a lot of questions about the FGC and then Smash. Would you, at N3rd St, consider doing like a full monthly event in the stylings of Cheesadelphia, Fragadelphia for the fighting game community? Would you do a Street Fighter like that, or maybe a Melee when you did build up there? Please don't say Melee.
So we're getting towards the point where we can start streaming our fighting game and Street Fighter events. Is that what you meant?
Less so that, because those are weekly events, right?
No, they're monthly.
Oh, they're monthly. Oh, my mistake. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes they happen more frequently, but generally they're like 1 Street Fighter and one fighting game event, and 1 Smash event per month is usually what we do.
Okay, so you would stream that when you get to that point, then? Cool.
Yep, we're just we're building out all of our overlays and stuff. We have an internal program that we use that's really awesome, and it makes it so dumb people like me can like do high production streaming. But the setup is a lot of setup, and it's just we've had other stuff that like keeps coming up, like that kind of has to supersede kind of these back burner projects. But we're trying to get there. We're trying to get to the point where maybe we can boost the prize pool a little bit and start pulling in higher quality players and getting good commentators out and having just like a nice stream and a higher production value than we currently have.
To be clear, if I do keep this bit into the final video, I don't have that hate for Smash that a lot of people in the FGC do. It's just fun. It's just funny jokes to poke fun at. Anyways, looking at the numbers through the years, how do you feel about the health of StarCraft 2 right now? You know, I mean, like you say, you've got a financially sustainable event. You're in a company that's looking to do bigger and better things. This is the second interview in a row where everything sounds so optimistic, and I know you guys aren't just StarCraft, but it seems to really go against this idea that, oh man, StarCraft 2's dying, and I'm not trying to spread propaganda, so I need you to tell me, what do you think about the health of StarCraft 2 right now?
Like, people say StarCraft's dead, right? But that doesn't mean anything. Like, when you look at something and you say, oh, this game is dead or it's alive, like, it's a totally useless distinction. So when I look at StarCraft, what I see is a game that has a dedicated fan base, but not a huge fan base, and that's okay. It's a game that's going to be on the back burner when it used to be on the front, and that's okay. There's going to be less tournaments and less money, which is hard, but there's a lot more online events cropping up and small stuff cropping up, and that can help fill in the gaps. And it probably won't be able to be a full-time job for as many people as it used to be. And I think people look at that and say, oh, it's dead. Like, it's really weird to me because it's so clearly not dead. Like, if you watched IEM Shanghai, for example, like, did that look like a dead game to you? BlizzCon is going to be a $250,000 tournament. Does that sound like a dead game to you? No, I think StarCraft will live basically forever. I think there will, even when there's nothing else, I think there will always be a tournament at BlizzCon. I think it's going to scratch an itch that no other game, like maybe until like Warcraft 4, can scratch. Because there's not really any other good RTS game out there other than Brood War. Like, so I think StarCraft is fine. I think it'll probably continue to decline slowly. I think we're over the worst of it. And I think it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a smaller game. And I think that's what a lot of people get upset about, and they say, oh, it's Blizzard, it's the balance, it's David Kim, it's this, it's that. It's not any of those things. It's the fact that StarCraft came out 6 years ago. It came out 6 years ago, and when it came out, there wasn't any competition. So if you wanted to watch esports, you watched StarCraft. Now there's a lot of games for people to watch, and people, it's not like StarCraft is the big tent that it used to be. Like maybe you really love video games, and you're not super crazy about RTS, but you want to watch people play games competitively, so you watched StarCraft. And those guys are gone, and they're probably not going to come back. And I don't think we necessarily have to try to court them to come back. Like, we have an awesome community. We have a really hardcore fan base. We have people that are seeing opportunity. People like Total Biscuit. Like, he saw a hole in content, and boom, he dropped a tournament that got like 30,000 peak viewers for an online tournament. I would say Cheeseadelphia has risen up in many ways to fill the void. Wardy is a super awesome guy that is like, oh, look, there's all these holes in content. Let me like create these cool projects that I can fill in. Base Trade TV has filled in a lot of the holes in the content. So yeah, as long as there's people that want to watch StarCraft and play StarCraft, it's not going away. The numbers aren't what they used to be. They're probably never going to be again. And I think that's totally fine.
You mentioned briefly Shoutcraft. Shoutcraft that fell on a weekend that Cheeseadelphia was also in. This kind of ties into the same point of, you know, how is StarCraft? Is it dead? Is it not? Schrodinger's StarCraft. But, I mean, I hear tournament organizers and casters complain pretty frequently recently how hard it is to find a space where there's nothing happening so they can schedule their event. Is that a difficult thing? Is that something that you have to keep in mind for all these different games? And how difficult is it for StarCraft in particular?
It's really hard. And I was actually pretty frustrated after Cheesadelphia, or before Cheesadelphia 3. DreamHack hadn't scheduled their qualifier. Like on day one, the DreamHack qualifier ran over us, and they scheduled that qualifier at like 9 o'clock the night before. So I was pretty unhappy with them, and I let them know that. But day 2, Shoutcraft conflicted, and even though that was hard, they hosted us at the end, which was like amazing. They hosted us for like 8,500 viewers. So that helped us get the best viewership we've ever gotten. So that was a bit of a double-edged sword. I would say we probably came out on top. It was probably better for us that Shoutcraft ran over us for part of the day, as weird as that sounds. When it comes to actual planning, before Cheese 3, I did everything in my power to make sure it wouldn't conflict. It ended up conflicting. I cleared it with Blizzard like 3 or 4 months before we announced it. And they said, yeah, that date's fine. Then I went into all of the kind of chat rooms and hangouts that all of us tournament organizers went in. And I said, hey guys, I'm going to use this date. Does anyone have anything on this date? And everyone was like, that's cool. You got it. And there still ended up being 2 events, two big events. And that's really hard. But to Blizzard's credit, and I think part of this is me whining a lot, to Blizzard's credit, there is now a better... they're facilitating communication between like people like me that I would consider myself like a T2 tournament organizer. Blizzard is doing a better job of helping facilitate communication between like T2 and T3 organizers and like the T1 organizers that are like really hard to get in contact with, because like the problem is never like, oh, Base Trade TV or like Fear Dragon or Wardy scheduled over one of my events, like because I can go talk to them, no problem. It's, oh, DreamHack or IEM scheduled over one of my events, and I can't get in contact with anyone to talk about maybe moving in the qualifier or if we can start our broadcast late or something, and there's no points of communication. Now Blizzard is helping to facilitate that and helping to deconflict, because they understand that our scene is smaller now, and it's really important that we don't like cannibalize our viewership.
To kind of bring everything to, we're nearing the close. You started out as just a fan who started posting on Dignitas as a volunteer, and then you got discovered by Richard Lewis on Reddit, and you worked with Esports Heaven, and then you worked IT at a hospital while you set up the Nerd Street stuff, and now you're working full-time in esports. Does it feel to you like, you know, you've quote-unquote, you've made it, or does it at least feel like making it is, you know, you can taste it now, like it's there, you can see it, it's tangible? How do you feel about that?
So I would say most days I feel like I've made it to some extent. It's not like when you hear someone like make it, like if you make it as like a pro athlete, right? Like you're boom, high six figure salary immediately. If you make it as an actor, like a lot of money. Making it in esports for me means like making enough money to pay all my bills with just esports. So there's definitely a hunger to do more and to grow. I think that I have a lot of strengths and a lot of abilities to offer, and I just want to continue to kind of propel myself into a position where like I can exert like my influence on the scene more and help it grow and help it just expand and become better. So yeah, it definitely feels like I've made it where like when people ask me what I do, I talk about it and I say, yeah, like this is what I do. This is all I do now. So in that sense, it definitely feels like I made it. But there's this never-ending hunger to do more. Like I would not be content if tomorrow like this esports journey ended and this is all I've done. I want to do more.
That's awesome. All power to you, you know? That's good. It's good that you're chasing your passion, and it's good that you feel like you can be a little fulfilled now. I think that's important. I think that's a good attitude to have, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, again, you're in a position of authority in the North American scene, in your local scene. You're in a position where you're able to pay your bills with esports. You came from the very bottom. What would you tell people trying to replicate your success and your hopeful future success, where you're starting to earn six-figure income and all that stuff? What would you tell people trying to make their way up in esports right now in 2016?
Say yes to every project. Doesn't matter if you have the skills or not. If you don't have the skills, learn them on the way. You're smart and you can figure it out. I trust you. Find your own projects. If you have an idea, just go for it. And if it sucks and it crashes and it burns, no one's going to remember. It's totally okay. The first event I ever tried to do was a 2v2 tournament where grandmasters and bronze players teamed up and played each other. And it was called Masters and Apprentices. And it was a really stupid idea and no one showed up. But, no one remembers your failures. So don't worry about being embarrassed. Just go and get after it. And, when you go to a content creator or whatever, like, bring something to the table. Like, no one's going to hire you just because you're a nice person. Like, it's great that you're a nice person, but you want to actually show up and say, hey, I can do X, Y, Z for you. Like, demonstrate your value. And if you can show up and demonstrate your value to someone, they will put you to work. Don't be afraid of working for free. Most people in esports are not paid. Like, obviously, don't let yourself be taken advantage of, but it's often worth the networking to donate some of your labor to a project. Be enthusiastic and just always show up. Like, Day 9 says this: showing up to work is like half the esports battle. The casters that make it are the ones that grind out every little cup, no matter how crappy and like $50 with no pro players. Like, the guys that make it, they're doing everything like that, and they're riding their own hard work and a little bit or a lot of it, honestly, of luck to the top.
So that's it for me. That's all I had. Do you want to do any shout-outs? Do you have anything that you wanted to talk about? Is there anything that you want to mention, shout-outs, anything like that? This is your time.
Cool. So shout out to N3rd St Gamers. You can follow them on Twitter at N3rdST Gamers. You can follow me on Twitter at NSGJoe. Go follow our Twitch page. It's N3rd St Gamers. We just got a subscribe button, and we're gonna have some sweet new emotes up for you soon. So definitely go give us a follow there. We broadcasted a crazy amount of StarCraft. I'm gonna be in Montreal. If anyone's going to DreamHack Montreal, come say hi to me. I love meeting people that are StarCraft fans. Yeah, that's it. And thank you to you, Cyan, for having me here.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks a lot, dude.